Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hi, everybody. Tom Woods here. I'm delighted to welcome you to episode 2661 of The Tom Woods Show, an episode that has nothing to do with Iran, but instead has to do with money and Bitcoin, but looked at from an angle I think most people tend to neglect, which is the morality of the question, that there is actually a moral dimension to monies and monetary systems. And joining us to talk about this is the best person in the world to do it, because he's just released a book on that, and that is Eric Sammons, who is editor-in-chief of Crisis Magazine and the author of the brand new book, Moral Money, The Case for Bitcoin. So Eric, welcome to the show. I can't believe I've never had you on, and I don't think we've ever corresponded before.
I don't think so. And I tell you what, feel like this is full circle for me, because literally it's you who got me into Bitcoin.
Whoa.
You did a podcast with Eric Voorhees back in 2013. I think you were subbing for Peter Schiff.
Peter Schiff, yeah.
Very ironic.
Isn't that ironic?
Very ironic.
Yeah.
And I had been contemplating the morality of fiat money and all that for years, and gold and all that. And then I heard about this on your podcast and did the typical Bitcoin thing of going down the rabbit hole because of that podcast. In fact, I wrote a self-published book years ago in 2015 about a very basic primer on Bitcoin. And in it, I just checked to make sure this is true. In the acknowledgments, I thanked you and Eric Voorhees because that's what got me started. So I feel like the whole thing is full circle. But as you can tell, I've listened to your program for a very, very long time. And so I've always enjoyed it.
Even before there was a Tom Woods Show. Yeah, I filled in for Peter Schiff and I had free reign to do whatever the heck I wanted. And I did that.
Yes,
and I had a lot of fun.
So it's funny when I see like Eric Voorhees debating with Peter Schiff on X and getting about Bitcoin and stuff. It always makes me chuckle because I'm kind of like, well, Peter, thanks, because you let Tom host your show, who brought in Eric, and that got me on Bitcoin. So
I know I got I don't think Peter would mind, but I got a text from him once saying that his son wanted to join one of my programs, but he wants to pay in Bitcoin, and like all he has is Bitcoin, and you only accept cash, and how can we work this out? I thought, I don't know what's going on in the Schiff household over there, but it must be interesting.
Yeah, must be.
All right. So let's dig into this. So obviously people can talk about the technical question of how Bitcoin works, and you do indeed devote some time to that. That people can say that it's, for various technical reasons, superior to fiat money. But as you're arguing, there's a right and wrong here. Like there's something wrong, not just technically wrong or from an efficiency standpoint wrong, but there's something morally wrong with the monetary system under which we live. So you start the book, instead of doing what I would do, which is start the book by describing everything that's wrong with the world, you start the book by explaining basically what a moral world would look like what the principles and properties of a moral money would be. Now, at the risk, this is not Joe Rogan, so we don't go for 3 hours, so we're not going to get into all of them. But maybe we might start there by painting the picture of a monetary world that passes the kind of moral systems that most people intuitively believe in.
Right. So it really, my interest in Bitcoin precedes the invention of Bitcoin, because I really was looking at and seeing the immorality of our current monetary system. Just so people know a little bit about my background, I'm a practicing Catholic. I believe, what the church teaches, but I will be honest, like I know you are the same way. I get very frustrated at times with church leaders. And I would hear them talk about things about the economy, and they would be saying we need a just wage and all these things. And I'd be like, okay, I'm with you on that we need a moral economy, but you don't seem to have any concept of how that would actually come about. And I remember reading actually your book, The Church in the Market, years ago, talking about some of these issues about how the Catholic Church address this issue. Now, my book doesn't come at it from a strictly Catholic point of view. It's more from a generic natural law, moral point of view. But I would see these issues, and like a perfect example is the just wage. Now, in Catholic teaching, which I'm not going to argue how authoritative it is right here, but the idea of that every employer should pay their employees a just wage. Now, I think all of us would feel like, okay, that makes sense to me. We don't want to exploit workers. We don't want to have slave labor or anything like that. But of course, there's a lot of problems on the margins. Like, okay, my 15-year-old daughter works at the local farmer's market. Does she have to get paid an amount that can support a whole family? Of course not. So there's a lot of margins here. But what I thought was a deeper question of, what about the fact that I might pay you a just wage today, but you save that money and in 2-5 years, all of a sudden it's worth a lot less and it can't support your family anymore. So the devaluing of those dollars that you receive, that seems to me to go against just wage more than a debate over should the minimum wage be $15 or $20 or whatever. And so those are the type of issues that I think we need to look at, like, and they're real moral questions about our money itself. And so a lot of it really ties back to the inflationary aspects of our money. But then you have the morality of, we're seeing it right now, the fact that governments can fund unpopular wars just by printing more money. That's a monetary system issue, because if you look at the history of a lot of military conflicts in history, you don't have this demand for unconditional surrender. You don't have this idea of a total war. You might have King A and King B getting in a spat. They have a few battles, and I'm not saying those are moral, but they're very constrained. Why? Because King A and King B can't just say, Jerome Powell, go print some more money for me because I need to fund this war. So what we see is these monetary questions are very much moral questions. They're not just, okay, I'm not getting rich or whatever the case may be. And they impact a lot more than what I just said. But those are some examples of how our monetary system, it is a question of right or wrong, ultimately.
It reminds me of something Ludwig von Mises said, that in the history of freedom, sound money belongs right up there with constitutions and bills of rights. And I think arguably much higher than those things, because those things can be disregarded. But if you have a hard physical constraint on the money, there's nothing you can do about that short of just chucking the entire system, which they have been pleased to do in the past. So now that, by the way you frame this, I would never have thought of that. And yet now that you've said it, it seems like the most obvious thing in the world as an answer to the concern about the so-called just wage. Because we can sit here and argue, well, $15 is a just wage. But then we get into, all right, well, what if I'm a college kid with 3 roommates and I have to pay only a quarter of a rent, but this guy is a husband with 8 children. Does he get a higher just wage? I mean, like, the complications seem endless. Much better to focus on the issue of the money itself. Because if you look at where gold was in the old days of the gold standard, over time it held its value. And it held its value without requiring people to become investors in the stock market or engage in activities with their money that they aren't even sure they know what they're doing in, just to tread water.
Yeah, that's a huge point I try to make in the book, and in general, was I've seen too many people, just average people, dads trying to support their families, doing everything right, working hard, putting some money aside. Well, then all of a sudden that money becomes devalued more and more because he's just putting it maybe in his savings account. Because that's how my dad did it. That's how my dad taught me to do it. That's how so many Americans thought that's what you do. You just put it aside in a savings account. It'll grow, and eventually when you retire, you'll have enough money for retirement. The problem is that because of inflation, your savings account, which might be making 2% if you're lucky, it can't even keep up with the real world inflation, not the CPI, but the real world inflation, which is 5-10%. And now all of a sudden you do everything right and you can't make it. So instead what happens is now you have to become a speculator. What's the latest tech stock? Oh, what's this cryptocurrency? Maybe it'll hit or something like that. And so instead of spending time with your family and raising your kids and doing the things that you should do because you've got a good job, you're doing everything right. Now all of a sudden you're on your computer at night thinking, okay, how can I hit it big? Not to get rich, but just simply to stay with the inflation rate, stay a little bit ahead of it so you have some savings. Again, we have a moral problem. I know people who don't have as many kids as they might want to because they don't feel like they can afford it. And when you look at it, it's not because they're not hardworking, not having decent jobs. They're computer programmers we're talking about here, but they can't do it. I know people who have delayed marriage. I know people who they want the wife to stay at home and take care of the kids, but they simply just can't because they're living in this inflationary environment where it's just not financially possible because their money keeps on being devalued over time. Those are all moral questions that are directly tied back to the monetary system we use.
If I may interject something that's not entirely relevant here, I noticed that somebody in my on one of my social media accounts in my feed pointed out that some time ago, apparently, I made a point on it must have been a number of years ago, I made a point on this podcast that he really absorbed and decided to live out in his life. And what I had said was, when it comes to having children, there will always be some reason that you can convince yourself that now isn't the right time. There will always be a reason you can think of to say, I should put it off and do it later. The problem is, because you're always putting it off, then you never do it.
That's right.
And when he heard that, it struck him like a bolt of lightning, and they went ahead and started having children, and they're quite happy with their decision. Right. So I just wanted to interject that sometimes, you get life-changing advice from old Woods here on the Tom Woods Show.
I mean, it's excellent advice too. I have 7 children, so obviously I've been very blessed. I don't regret obviously any one of them, and I've been very fortunate to be in a financial situation where I can do that. But that's what I mean. I was listening to a Bitcoin podcast, I guess it was maybe 6 months, a year ago, and his host, she was talking about how her friend's now having another baby, and she feels like she can do it because of Bitcoin gave her the financial ability to do that. And I was just like, this is so wonderful because she's using moral money. She's now able to do something she wants to do. And now she can actually do it and have another kid, which I just think it's wonderful.
You're also talking about some of the properties that a moral money would have. And I think we've kind of at least suggested one of them, which is that it can't be easy to reproduce.
Right.
Because, especially because, we live in an environment in which it is expected that the state has a hand in the creation of money. And if you say to a monopolistic institution, you can just create all the money you want because there really is no physical constraint stopping you. The constraint they operate under is prudence. What they think they can get away with, what they think the economy can sustain without too much price inflation that might make the populace angry. But in principle, there's nothing stopping them. There's no physical constraint. And even if they ran out of paper, they can always just add extra zeros onto the existing paper. So it has to be something that you can't just create in infinite supply.
Right. One of the things I did was I've read lots of books on money, and they all talk about the properties of money. It's divisible, it's portable, it's durable, it's fungible. Also, it's scarce. It's independent is one I don't hear as much, but I think that's an important one that we see more and more now today. Is verifiable. What I realized is those are 2 different categories of properties, though. The properties of usefulness or efficiency, those are important. So, for example, it's divisible and portable and fungible and durable. But then the other properties, I would say they're moral properties. It's scarce. That's a moral property because you can't just, like you said, there's no constraints on you if it's not scarce, if you can just print it out of thin air. Also, it's verifiable. It can't be counterfeited easily. Now, to be honest, the US dollar has gotten very difficult to counterfeit these days. So it's pretty verifiable now. But also it's independent. I think this is probably the most important. Maybe scarcity is probably the most important. But independence is so important for morality, meaning nobody can control the money supply. Nobody can just say, we need more money, we're going to print it. It's 2008, let's go ahead and start the money printer. It's COVID, let's go ahead and start the money printer. Instead, it's this fixed amount because if you can just print whenever you want to, it just won't happen. I was just giving this analogy the other day to somebody. If you had the ability to have a money printer in your house, you're the only person on earth who has it, and it prints real money, not counterfeit money. I don't know a single human being who wouldn't be greatly tempted to use it at times, even if they're the most saintly person. And in fact, what happens to say your wife gets in a car accident, you can't afford the bills? Who's not going to use that money printer and print more money? And then all of a sudden it becomes, well, our family really needs a vacation. Let's go ahead and print some more money to pay for that vacation. And then it becomes, oh, I really like that. I really want to go to get season tickets to the Cincinnati Reds. I'm going to go ahead and buy those. The point is, when you have that ability, it's almost inhuman to not be able to use it. It's not really possible for most people, at least. And so, of course, when you talk about our government officials who aren't exactly the standards of virtue in our society, they're going to use it all the time. So independence is a property money, but more importantly, it's a moral property money because it makes the money more moral. And also, I think it encourages a more moral use of the money.
We got a lot of broken things in the United States, a whole lot. But surely one of the brokenest is American healthcare and American health insurance. It's frustrating and expensive. Claims denials are becoming more common. And let me take a wild guess. Maybe something called the Affordable Care Act was misnamed and hasn't actually made your care more affordable. Well, that's why Crowd Health was created. It's not health insurance. It's a better way to pay for healthcare through crowdfunding. Because let's face it, your insurance policy is opaque and full of unpleasant surprises. Your premiums are going up every year. You wind up feeling taken advantage of. Crowd Health is doing things differently. For $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you'll get access to a community of people who are willing to help out in the event of an emergency. You'll get access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and so much more without doctors' networks getting in the way. Let Crowd Health help with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months. Go to joincrowdhealth.com/woods. Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com/woods. That's joincrowdhealth.com/woods.
So what is, in a nutshell, what is the story, as you describe it, of the devolution of money? What has gone wrong?
Well, one of the things I think, it points a finger at gold, at some of the, I'm a big gold fan. I'm not like anti-gold, but it has limitations. And really what we see is money began, of course, as most probably your listeners know, long ago as a substitution for barter, the ability to have an indirect exchange. You create this medium of exchange, not by government fiat, but just simply people say, I think seashells would be a good way. I could trade you for seashells. I can then use those to buy something from my neighbor. And then if you look at the efficiency properties of money, gold becomes that the best object to use for that because it has that divisibility and portability and fungibility and durability and scarcity. So it's like, this is great. People like to think, I think your audience knows better, but people like to think, oh, it's because it was shiny and pretty and used for jewelry. That's why gold was used. That's not why every single culture in the world used gold as money. It's because it had those properties of money. But the problem is, it doesn't have all those properties of properties of money the best. For example, portability. That's the real Achilles heel of Bitcoin. Of gold. Because what you have now is, as an economy gets more complex and becomes bigger and bigger, the difficulty of trading gold, exchanging gold, becomes greater and greater. The distance to move it, things of that nature. The size of it as you get bigger purchases, and to hold it, to secure it, all those things are a real weakness of gold. It's portability. It's not very good at that property. So people thought, hey, we have a workaround. Let's have paper to represent gold. So you have your banks that use paper. But as soon as you do that, you've introduced now a new variable into the equation, which is trust. I have to trust that the bank really holds the gold that this piece of paper represents. And then, of course, the government gets involved. I have to trust that. Eventually, so now we're getting a devolution of money because now it's a piece of paper which is just worth whatever that bank tells you it's worth, and you have no way to verify necessarily it's really backed by the gold. Eventually, then, of course, the governments realize, let's not even bother with the facade. Let's just say we're backing it. There's no need for a gold behind it. And of course, we saw that in the 20th century that led to the complete removal of the gold standard. But I would argue That's why I would argue against returning to gold, is because I think that's the natural progression of gold. Eventually, as you get a more modern economy, a more complex economy, you just can't use gold anymore. And so that's the devolution, is now all of a sudden it's a natural thing to go from gold, go up the gold, so to speak, the evolution to gold. Gold becomes this great money, better than anything else in nature. But then you have this natural devolution as an economy gets more and more complex. You get more people involved, greater distances involved. And then, of course, with the creation of the internet, you have the ability to have exchanges online across the world instantaneously. You can't do that with gold without using some type of representation, which needs a trusted party. And that, of course, is where Bitcoin comes in.
So that's some of the story of what's ultimately gone on. And then you have a chapter on the immoral money of today. Now, I think we've kind of gotten to the gist of that, but it's not just that today's money is inflationary, or is prone to be debased, and prices are rise as a result. There are actually other aspects of the money. Like, the money is actually worse than you think. It's not simply that. There are a couple of other aspects to it that make it even worse than you thought.
Right. I mean, the biggest thing I think people don't really recognize, I hear a lot of people might say fiat money is problematic. It might even be evil or immoral, something like that. But it leads people to different ways of looking at the world. It changes cultures, actually. And so, for example, our current monetary system, which of course is very Keynesian, and the idea of printing more money and you have to have this inflation, it encourages people to spend money and to spend it sooner rather than later. Because if I know my $100 is going to be worth $95 in a year, I'm like, well, I might as well spend it now. But if I know my $100 might be worth $110 in a year, or just even $100 in a year, I'm going to be less likely to spend it. I mean, of course, our whole economy now is built on the George Bush after 9/11, go out and spend money to tell the terrorists that they're wrong. But really, what it's doing is it's actually corrupting us in a lot of ways. It makes us more consumerist. It makes us more based on our base desire. Go down to our base desires. Like, okay, well, I'm just going to buy this now because my money's not going to be worth anything later. So it has a corrupting influence. I mean, it essentially is immoral. There's the idea that we're just going to create money and we're just going to be able to print. Certain people in society can print money, but others cannot. That itself is immoral, but it's also corrupting because it makes us more immoral, frankly, because it leads us to, it incentivizes choices that are actually not good for us. Instead of having temperance, it's this idea of just, okay, buy whatever you can right now. Don't even save for the future. It forces a high time preference on people.
And I would add, because there's no physical constraint on the money producer, there is in principle no limit to how much favored firms or sectors can be bailed out. There's no constraint on that other than political will, which is rather a thin reed, as we've discovered.
Right.
Whereas with Bitcoin, good luck.
Yeah.
Where's it going to come from?
Well, it's also the catilian effect, of course, the idea that when you print new money, it's the well-connected, the elites who get it first. And so they can spend it before it has the impact on prices in the economy. And so the poor and even the middle class, they're the last ones to get it. And so they don't really have that benefit of that new money, like the Lockheed Martins and the banks and people like that who get that money first. And so that right there, I mean, that's the thing, you hear a lot about inequality. You hear the left talk about this great inequality in the world. Well, this is actually fostering a real inequality because it's allowing the rich to get richer through corrupt means and the poor to get poorer through these corrupt means. And so it just impacts our society in so many ways I don't think people realize. And I really think it's like the base layer of corruption and immorality in our system is the money that we use.
I think one of the stumbling blocks, though, in wider adoption is that, and I've been saying this for years, people are tired of hearing it, but is that I think people who are in the Bitcoin world, they love it. They are dedicated to it. They're so interested in it. They could talk about it all day. But unfortunately, they are really knowledgeable about a lot of technical things, but they are not knowledgeable about how to explain this to your grandmother.
Right.
So when you ask people, well, what is Bitcoin? Well, within the first sentence, they're using the term peer-to-peer as if everyone knows what that means. They're saying that it's decentralized. Most people have never even heard much as it saddens me, it weighs heavily on my heart that most people, I've not heard the word decentralized. Unfortunately, they haven't. The word node gets used. So right away, you've already lost grandma.
Right.
They're not interested. So there needs to be an easier, more accessible way for people to understand what's going on here. Now, you can come back with, look, you probably don't know how your car works, and yet you drive around in it. You probably don't really know how the internet works, and yet you use it every day. So you don't really strictly have to understand how Bitcoin works. But the difference is my life, let's say my wealth and well-being doesn't directly rely on my car. If I had to, I could use public transportation. If I had to, I could ride a bike. Whereas this is the accumulated savings of my whole life. I think I do need to know a little bit about how it works. And yet how Bitcoin works is your 54-page chapter.
Yeah.
So I can't even ask you to try to summarize it. Do you think this is a stumbling block?
I absolutely do. I have talked to people about Bitcoin over the years. Early on, I did the whole decentralized peer-to-peer. In fact, I think in my 2015 book, when I explain what Bitcoin is, my first thing is it's a decentralized blah, blah, blah. And then though, I got so many blank stares from so many of my friends and neighbors, I was like, okay, this clearly isn't working. It's just not possible. I think what you have to lead with, and I've been doing some interviews for this book, and sometimes it's be like a Catholic station, and they give me 10 minutes, and it's like, I just know the audience knows nothing about any of this. They don't know it. And so I just, ultimately what I start with, I say something to the effect of, Bitcoin is savings, it's not an investment. Bitcoin is a form of money. And that usually leads to other questions, because when they say it's a savings, not investment, then they're saying, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Everybody talking about investing in Bitcoin. It's going up. It's over $100,000 now. These companies, Michael Saylor and all, they're buying all this and they're investing all this. What do you mean it's not an investment? Then I start talking about what money is a little bit more and the difference between savings and investment and how Bitcoin ultimately is just a form of sound money. And often it leads eventually into some more technical details. Like the number one question I get is, what do you mean it's scarce? It's just something on the internet. You can just create more if you want to. And so then I can start talking about what Bitcoin mining is and things of that nature, which are obviously more technical and more complex. And if I can get them just to understand that it is a form of money that takes the best properties of gold, the usefulness and efficiency properties of gold, and the moral properties of gold, along with the efficiency of current digital dollars, credit cards and things like that, and it combines them into one, then at least I get them listening and saying, okay, I get it now. You're saying it's like gold in that it's moral, scarce, and it's like digital dollars, your credit card, in that it can be used very efficiently. You can buy stuff across the world with it very quickly and cheaply and all that. And it combines those. And then you just have to wait for the questions, because honestly, if they don't really care at that point, I'm not going to bore them by explaining how a node works and how it gives a decentralized peer-to-peer network that can keep, things independent. They just don't care anymore.
Yeah, I think that's smart. You do spend some time talking about Bitcoin mining in your section about how it works. And I know I have a lot of people listening to this this is old hat. Of course, they know how that all works. But I think it is an interesting way. Now we know there's a cap on how much Bitcoin there can ever be in the world, but how that final amount gradually makes its way into the world is I think nevertheless an interesting process that I think can be explained to a reasonably intelligent person. Can you give it a shot?
Yeah, the thing is, it's very nerve-wracking because I know in your audience are probably some people who are much, much smarter than me and could explain it even better. But I think ultimately the way I try to explain it to people is this. First of all, that mining, it takes its analogy, the name from gold mining, i.e. this is how new Bitcoin is created. It's what keeps those limits from being just anybody can print Bitcoin or create Bitcoin how they want to. And essentially what it is computers, sophisticated, very advanced computers, are basically engaged in a mathematical contest. to see, okay, who can solve a problem the fastest? And whoever solves the problem the fastest, they get the new Bitcoin that's created. And it's on a very strict schedule that's based on the way the software is written. And so eventually, right now, for example, 3.125 Bitcoin are created each time this mathematical puzzle is solved. And the software controls how quickly the problem can be solved. If, for example, somebody solves it very quickly and they keep solving it quickly, they will make it more difficult so that on average, every 10 minutes, new Bitcoin is created. And so really it's like an arms race. And the beauty of this is this what secures it from counterfeiting, from new people creating it. If I wanted to, if I create a program and say, I'm going to send Tom some new Bitcoin that I basically just made up, I don't really own. Well, what happens is the miners, along with the nodes, basically the whole Bitcoin network says, that is not how Bitcoin is created. You didn't solve the problem that you were supposed to. You didn't spend all the money and resources you needed to get a really advanced computer so you could solve that problem. So it just doesn't count. So ultimately what mining is doing is it's making sure new people can't just create Bitcoin out of thin air. The whole thing we've been talking about, the problem with fiat currency, mining is like that underlying technical way in which we make sure that actually happens on the Bitcoin network.
Hey, everybody, I don't know how much one podcaster can improve your life, but, when that podcaster is all woods, the answer is a lot. I'm about to tell you about my friends at Federated Computer who are going to save you a bundle. They're changing the way businesses buy software. We all need software to run our business, but the best business software does not have to cost you thousands of dollars each month. The typical Federated Computer customer saves 75% or more on their software bill, gets great software, top-notch customer service and support, and a software solution that is uniquely installed for your business and without any surveillance or breaches of privacy. For example, if you use Google for email, Salesforce for CRM, Slack for team chat, ListMonkey for customer communications, and Airtable for data management, with a team of 10, you'd save $9,000 per year on software costs switching to Federated Computer. And what's wild, the cost of Federated Computer doesn't grow as your team grows. You can use your Federated Computer savings to grow your business rather than feed the woke Silicon Valley software companies. The Federated Computer team invented computing in the cloud. Now they're taking a hammer to the ridiculously high prices of business software and have many, many satisfied customers to prove they deliver. Federated Computer has been a longtime supporter of the Tom Woods Show. They're offering 30% off their already low prices when you use coupon code WOODS. So go to www.federated.computer to begin to save 75% or more on your monthly software costs. That's www.federated.computer. These folks are going to do you a big, big favor. Check them out.
What is it about Bitcoin that makes it, by contrast, a moral money? I mean, we've talked about we kind of implied it.
Right.
I would also say that the way we got fiat money was not exactly immaculate from a moral point of view, that we started off with a gold standard and then various forms of dishonesty intervened and we were left with this fiat money. It wasn't that we've had fiat money from time immemorial. It's that we had a more or less sound money system, and that was through various broken promises and coercion simply taken from us gradually over a series of steps. And the very fact that Bitcoin does not involve that automatically gives it a presumption of moral superiority. But of course, there's more to it than that.
Yeah, and Bitcoin, in a lot of ways, really does have an almost immaculate conception in how it was created. And essentially what happened was Satoshi Nakamoto, we don't know exactly who that is, but he did work to combine the moral properties of gold with the efficiency and usefulness properties of digital currency. And the key point of this is that independence, that when it was created, Satoshi, what he did was he released the protocol onto the world, and he just said, okay, people, just go start mining. And he did not own any beforehand. He didn't pre-mine, which a lot of places do. And he did mine at the beginning because somebody had to. And he was literally, he and Hal Finney were the only people involved at first. And so he did mine some. So he did own some. He does own some Bitcoin, everybody believes, because he mined a lot of the original Bitcoin. But then after a few years, he left the project completely. Nobody to this day even knows who he is. A lot of people want to know, but he's somehow remained anonymous all this whole time. And so there's no entity controlling it. And I think that is the key aspect of making it moral. Making it scarce was very important. And that's very, that's a key property to a moral money. But anybody could have made a something like that scarce. The fact that it's independent means it's truly scarce, meaning Satoshi can't go in. Even if Satoshi came back, he proved he really was Satoshi. He said, I want to make the limit no longer 21 million. I want to make it 50 million or 100 million. He can't actually do that because of the fact, the way the Bitcoin network works out, all the nodes, which are basically computers that are making the transactions and making them go through and all that stuff. There's over 20,000 of them are owned by just people around the world. I have a Bitcoin node and a bunch of people do. And there's no incentive for us to say, let's go make 50 million Bitcoin instead of 21 million. So that independence is a direct contrast to how fiat money was both created and how it's managed. I mean, it's 100% a centralized control. Certain people can decide if we want more money in the system or not, a very small number of people. Whereas with Bitcoin, there is no person, no organization. If Donald Trump decided tomorrow, I really want Bitcoin to have a lot more Bitcoin in the system, which, honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if he decided that someday. And we're going to have the whole U.S. government forcing that. He couldn't do it. He just couldn't make it happen because all the Bitcoiners in the world would be like, no, we're just not going to update our software to make that happen. So that, I think, is its fundamental moral nature, is how it was conceived, how it was created, gave it a independence, it gave it a scarcity, but then it gave it an independence to back up that scarcity and really make that scarcity hold for the long term.
So you do have a section in the book on how to get started. So what is your recommendation for somebody who says, yeah, look, I've been curious about it, but I've never really followed up with it. And a lot of my friends are really interested in it. But again, this is something that would involve the expenditure of my money if I were to convert US dollars into Bitcoin. I mean, this is what I've worked for throughout my life. I want to be really careful about it. And there's a lot, it seems like there's a lot to learn.
Yes.
So what would you say that would maybe make people think, even though there is a little bit to learn, you can do it?
Right. This is, I think, where Bitcoiners also lose people. Because we start talking about, well, the best and most real way to do it is you have your own node, you verify your own transactions, you have all this stuff. And it's like you've just lost everybody. If my sister, who's a smart person, but not super technically literate, if she can't do it, just forget it. It's not going to be useful at all. So I basically say it's okay. You start off, you just buy some from a reputable Bitcoin company. I mean, personally, I'm not getting paid anything to endorse them, but I like river.com. That's one that I personally use and I like for a lot of reasons. I won't get into all of them here. But the point is, you go somewhere like that and you just buy a little Bitcoin. You don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin. You can buy $5 worth. You can buy $100 worth. And I tell people, just do that first. Maybe get $100 worth. Whatever. If you're a rich person, go ahead, get $100,000 worth. I don't care. But get $100 worth. Hold it, kind of understand it, and then find somebody to send it to. Some of it, maybe like $10 of it too. And maybe get another friend to buy 100 and just send it to each other. If you lose it, if you screw up something, it's a lot harder to lose it now than it was back in the old days. But if you end up losing it or whatever, it's not going to kill you if you lost $10 worth of Bitcoin. But there's when you send Bitcoin to another person, there's a light bulb that just clicks in most people's mind, like, oh, I get this now. The power of this. I did not have to check with my credit card company. I did not have to check with the government or anything like that. I just sent money to this person and they received it without anybody telling me it's okay to do. And so I think that's where you just start off with that. Use it a little bit. And then that will hopefully incentivize you to study it some more. And then you'll move on from just having it at some Bitcoin exchange or something like that to saying, maybe I want to find out a way I can hold this myself. It's so much more advanced than it was back when I first got started. I mean, I was literally using pieces of paper called paper wallets to hold some Bitcoin. And that was, I just knew this is not going to take off if this remains the way that it's going to have to happen. And then, but now there's another thing I'm not endorsing. I'm not paid or anything, but like BitKey is a product where it's very user friendly, and you can hold your own Bitcoin in BitKey. I know for the purist out there, like, wow, it's not really self-custody 100%. I get that. But for average Jane and Joe, it is basically equivalent to self-custody. It allows you to spend your Bitcoin without anybody telling you can or cannot do that. So I would just say you start off very small like that. And as you get more into it, you also owning a little bit helps you understand and ride the different changes. I always tell my wife whenever I buy a little Bitcoin, I'm like, I know the price of Bitcoin is going down tomorrow because I bought some today. That's just the way it seems to always work. And so being able to see that, okay, I bought $100 worth of Bitcoin and today it's worth only $90. Wait, it's only a week later. What the heck? Being able to say, okay, let's just learn more about it, hold it for a while, and understand that, yes, there are short-term fluctuations, but if you hold it, and I always tell people, don't bother holding it if you're not going to hold it for at least 4 or 5 years. Hold it, and then over time, you're going to see the value is going to go up. It is something that's going to be a good savings vehicle that will keep your purchasing power intact, your hard-earned money and energy you spent to earn that money, that you keep that intact, because that's another moral issue here. You work so hard for this money, and all of a sudden the value of it's being taken away from you. Your hard, that's what they're doing. They're taking away your work is what they're really taking away. So all these things you start to understand more than just listening to me. I mean, I encourage people to buy my book, but really you got to at some point just say, okay, I got to pull the trigger. I'm going to buy a little bit. I'm going to hold it. I'm going to send it to somebody and kind of learn more that way.
Yeah, as with so many things in life, the best way to learn is by doing.
Yes,
It honestly is. You can read a lot of books, but the best way to learn is by doing, and this is no exception. And the other thing about that is sometimes we put things off because we exaggerate how difficult or annoying they're going to be, and we put it off, and then when we actually do them, we realize I was being ridiculous, building this up into some horrible ordeal in my mind, and it actually took me 20 minutes. And I've been putting it off for 5 months. I mean, we've all been in that situation. That thing on your to-do list that stays there every day. You can't bring yourself to do it. There's a principle called I think it's called like eat the frog. I think it might have been coined by Brian Tracy, and the idea is the frog represents the thing in your day that you least want to do. And his answer is you do that first thing. You get that out of the, you force yourself to do that first thing. And it sets the tone for the day because you can say, I did it. And then you can go on with your day. And then also you can very often be pleasantly surprised that frog was not that difficult, actually. It was not what I had built it up in my mind. So this is your frog, those of you who have been interested in this. And it's time to just go ahead and eat that thing and move on. And a great way to get started doing that, of course, is by reading Eric's book, which is Moral Money, The Case for Bitcoin. So I'll have that linked at tomwoods.com/2661. You can just easily click and grab it. I assume you have no particular preference as to where people get it as long as they do?
Yeah, I really don't. You can buy it directly from me at ericsammons.com. You get a signed copy if you do that, if you buy it directly from me. But otherwise, you can buy it. Of course, it's a big, the Amazons. You can buy it from the publisher, Sophia Institute Press. I don't really care. I just know if you want a signed copy directly from me, then buy it at my website.
Okay, Eric Sammons, Sammons. If you, as we were talking about before we recorded, if you type in Eric Sammons into anything online, the autocorrect is going to try to change it to Eric Simmons. That's a different guy. We don't know who he is. This is Eric Sammons. So right. ericsammons.com is where you'd go for an autographed copy. Well, Eric, I'm glad we had a chance to talk. I really like your book very much. I think there are obviously a lot of books on this topic, but this hits a particular angle in such a way that I think we can legitimately call it unique. So thank you very much for doing that and for being here today.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate all the work you're doing. I got to tell a quick story if you don't mind. My wife said I have to tell it.
Okay.
And it actually ties into something you said earlier. For years, we used a book when we homeschooled our kids that included a section on just wage that talked about like somebody with 3 roommates, and they made it like, no, the company has to pay this certain amount no matter what the person was doing. And she'd always send the kids down to me for that lesson and explain why that's not true. Well, we got smart last year, and you know what we did, of course. We went to the Ron Paul homeschool curriculum.
Oh, good.
My wife is actually teaching history for my high school daughter with your program, your history course. And she just like, you have to tell Tom how much it's great for my daughter, but like my wife, who is a graduate in a bachelor's degree with international studies in Russian and political science minor, she said, I have learned more in this program by listening to it with my daughter than I did in all my high school and college that I've ever learned, which include tons of history. She's like, I've learned more. And I'm just sitting there listening with my daughter. So I just had to bring that up because huge endorsement of the program that you're doing there.
Well, that is extremely generous of you. RonPaulHomeschool.com. You should check that out. That's very generous of you to say. I don't normally do this. I want to get up and grab something and show it to you. Hold on just a sec.
Sure.
So again, first of all, thank you for that kind endorsement. I was very happy to make those courses for the Ron Paul program. But there's a book that came out, I don't know when, long time ago. All my books are having anniversaries and it's making me sad. This is from 2007. I was just a contributor, but Philip Booth over in the UK with the Institute of Economic Affairs put together a collection called Catholic Social Teaching in the Market Economy. And you can find this book, if you just Google that, Catholic Social Teaching in the Market Economy, you can actually find a free PDF online. I mean, the book, I think they've earned everything they were going to earn on it. It's 17 years old, so they just made it available to the general public. And I contributed the chapter on the just wage to this book, and I'm very pleased with it.
Oh,
so
good.
When you mentioned the just wage in particular, my ears went up a bit because I thought, well, I've given that an awful lot of thought myself. So anyway, because of your that was very generous and unsolicited testimonial, let me show you the courtesy of finishing up by reminding people of the name of your book, which is Moral Money, The Case for Bitcoin. So really the best Tom Woods Show listener will go get Eric's book, Moral Money, and then go join RonPaulHomeschool.com. I mean, that really is the ideal listener.
That is, absolutely.
All right. Eric, thanks very much. Thank your wife for me. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.